Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Do I Have Time For This? The series that looks at old and new video games, from indie to AAA and everything in between, to help you figure out if you've got the time to play, finish, 100% complete a game, or to just leave it in your backlog to forever gather dust. Today we're coming back stronger in Saros, the long-awaited spiritual sequel to 2021's tough as nails roguelike, Returnal. 5 years later, developer Housemarque has once again shown us the true limits of what the PS5 can do in this graphically intensive and effects-heavy bullet hell style third-person shooter. Set in the far future, Saros sees you land on the planet Carcosa, trying to find out what happened to the 3 echelon teams sent prior to yours to colonize and strip the planet of its resources for the big corbo of this universe, Soltari. You play as Arjun Devraj, played by the ever-fantastic Rahul Kohli, who you'll recognise from basically anything Michael Flanagan makes, or the gut-punch drama We Were Liars. Arjun is a very capable soldier, and seems to fit into the brutality of this insane world with barely any issue, but as we come to find out, there's more to him than meets the eye. All of this gameplay footage is captured on a base PS5, and whilst playing I barely noticed any real performance issues, save for the occasional frame drop during a boss fight, which when you see how much goes on during a boss fight, you'll be surprised it runs at all. This is another graphically impressive, well-tested and great performing game from Sony's first-party teams. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, and if you want to go the extra mile in terms of support, you can now become a channel member to get some extra perks for only $1.99 a month by clicking the join button below. It's time to live, die, repeat, but always come back stronger.
I think it's the eclipse. It feels closer.
With Saros being a spiritual sequel to Returnal, there's going to be a ton of comparisons in this review, not purely for a point of reference, but because with it being a roguelike game, many people were turned off from Returnal due to how punishing it could be. Here in Saros though, there are a ton of different features that make the overall experience more accessible, and more forgiving for people who can't devote hours to a single game session with nothing to show for it. But first, let's cover the story and world of Carcosa, the planet Soltari attempted to colonize and found so much more. Arjun is an enforcer, a kind of paid mercenary that works as private security on Echelon 4, a support team sent in to find out what happened to the research and colonizing teams that were sent in previously. This biomechanical world Housemarque has created here looks like something straight out of H.R. Geiger's sketchbook, known mainly for their work on the Alien franchise. You can see that Soltari have attempted to make their own civilization here, but there was a race of beings here previously that had carved out their own path into the terrain, and it's great to see the two worlds collide. There's a fairly decent range of biomes that get increasingly more grandiose the closer you get to the end of the game, with less focus on the industrial and more focus on the fantastical the further you get. Couple this with the esoteric soundtrack that has both moments of wonder and reflection and strong thumping beats for combat, and this is truly a well-made world I'd never ever want to visit in real life, but it's so fun to play through. The story itself is very engaging, offering a core mystery of what happened to the previous teams, whilst each member of Arjun's crew seemingly have their own personal reasons for being on the expedition. It's very much sci-fi writing 101, but I think it's written very well here, as the members of your team gradually get affected by the never-ending sun and the coming of the eclipse, which I'll explain later. Counter to Returnal, which was a very personal story for Celine as she crashed onto the alien planet, Saros is all about the team, Arjun, and the people he has come to rescue, emphasizing a strong theme around relationships, toxic masculinity, and the importance of knowing when to break the cycle. Next, let's cover the actual gameplay. As you'll have seen so far, this game is an incredibly fast and frenetic third-person shooter, one I'm not afraid to describe as bullet hell, especially later in the game when things dial up to 11. The core shooting of the game feels incredible thanks to the most underused feature of the PlayStation 5, the haptics. You can feel every bullet leave your gun, every laser that zips past your head, and every puddle you step in. It's so good, and not used enough by PlayStation developers. Saros also uses the adaptive triggers to full effect too. giving you an alternative fire mode for each weapon with a half press of the left trigger and a power move for a full press. In a panic situation, this does mean you're going to occasionally fire off your power move when you don't mean to, but it's not the end of the world.
Chill! It was a misinput. Calm down! You calm the down! There was a misinput!
The weapons themselves honestly aren't that much to write home about, and I think this comes from the alternative fire mode feeling a bit nerfed in Saros compared to Returnal. This is likely due to the power attack being its own separate thing, but the weapons are essentially just your standard pistol, rifle and shotgun with variations that differ in terms of fire modes. Later on there are some more interesting power weapons and main weapons, but nothing I think massively changes the game. Although I will say they are pretty fun regardless, I was never saying oh no, not this gun again, save for the shotgun which I feel is a little lackluster in this game. There's also an overdrive move which is essentially a super you charge through combat. It kills bosses and clears enemies, as all good super moves should do. Like with Returnal, these weapon drops are random, so you need to make sure you're competent with each, and they scale based on your stats and proficiency level, which goes up the more XP you collect. These stats tie in with the artifacts you gather throughout your runs, which offer a bonus to one of 3 stats: resilience for health, command for power, and drive, which determines how much XP drops from enemies. The artifacts can also give you extra perks like a shield after picking something up or health after killing enemies. While some of these feel pretty overpowered, the large majority, for me at least, never really felt worth engaging with. I could take or leave a flat +4 to power or extra XP from killing enemies with melee. I'd say this felt like an overall drawback compared with its predecessor, when Returnal getting one strong artifact could completely change your run. The adrenaline system is also back in Saros, meaning that if you kill enemies and collect XP without getting hit, you'll earn a ton of passive perks to help you shred enemies, with the caveat that one single hit will reset you back to 0. The system itself is incredibly rewarding and adds stakes to even the most mundane of encounters, although it can feel a little cheap sometimes when you accidentally miss a platform and lose the level 5 adrenaline you worked so hard to build up. We can't talk much more about the gameplay aspect of Saros without mentioning the Eclipse, possibly the most unique aspect of the game. The Eclipse is the main source of infinite power in Carcosa, but it comes at a significant cost. Certain paths will only open during the Eclipse, but it has to be entered into willingly. The Eclipse changes the already harsh environment of Carcosa into something else entirely, making enemies stronger, changing elements of the terrain like making perfectly normal pools of blood into corrosive acid, and making every enemy capable of giving Arjun the corruption debuff. The upside of doing this is that the enemies drop significantly more XP, and the artifacts you get are stronger, although they now come with an associated debuff, meaning you can get a one-hit shield after killing an enemy, but your dodge is on a bigger cooldown, or your gun jams when you receive damage. It's a good way of pushing you towards embracing the Eclipse for that bigger reward, but then having you weigh up whether the new artifacts and XP are worth the hassle they'll inevitably bring you. It's really inventive the way the map changes, and different things are added in to make the environment even more hostile, alongside the absolutely stunning shot of the eclipsed sun itself. It makes the world feel more alive and more reactive to the story, especially as you often need to incite the eclipse in order to progress to the area boss. Corruption is one of the biggest threats in Saros, and it's time to cover the bullets held within this bullet hell game. First and foremost are blue projectiles that can be absorbed with the shield by holding R1. Absorbing these projectiles will provide you with energy to perform a power move, essentially being a push-pull mechanic for power, wherein an enemy attacks you, you absorb it, and throw it straight back for huge damage. Yellow projectiles are the corruption attacks that will temporarily reduce Arjun's total health if he's hit by them. They cannot be deflected or absorbed, only dashed through. Finally are the red projectiles, which can't be dashed through or absorbed by the shield, but after an upgrade can be parried. This is a real game changer due to how damaging these red projectiles can really be. Where the game gets complicated is, bosses and high level enemies love to throw out combinations of all 3 of these attack types out, sometimes at the same time, meaning you have to find a safe pocket to block with a shield, dash through a wave, or parry to send a load of projectiles back at the enemy. It's a very delicate balance to get all of these 3 things into your head and have attacks that give you the option of, sometimes at least, all 3 to pick from in terms of how to deal with it. The screen gets absolutely littered with this stuff late game, and it's so impressive how well Housemarque pulled this off to feel so rewarding. By the end, it feels like you're seeing the Matrix.
Okay, you have some skill.
With all these projectiles flying around, there's almost certainly going to be one outcome. your inevitable death at some point. So let's get on to the roguelite aspect of the game and how much the developers have added to make it a more forgiving game than their previous outing. There is an in-game explanation for how you keep coming back to life in this game, but whilst for you it's 5 minutes you've been gone, for your team it's months or even years at a time. First and foremost, you only lose a portion of your XP on death, and if you have a high drive stat, you'll get a decent bonus on top of what you collected. This XP alongside a rare resource called Halcyon can be taken to an upgrade tree once you get so far in the story, to sink into an absolutely gargantuan skill tree. This tree offers passive upgrades to health, power and drive, but also increases your starting proficiency for better weapons, makes the adrenaline system easier to level up, gives you extra artifact slots, alongside a whole host of other bonuses. This means no matter what, a run of longer than 20 minutes will always be useful, and no matter how many times you die to a boss, you come back to fight them again with more health or more damage. You also have on top of this the option to add modifiers to your run. Again, after progressing so far in the story, you'll gain access to a system that allows you to essentially pick your own difficulty for the game, increasing your damage, enemy damage, higher corruption damage versus you taking less per hit, and so on. The game encourages you to use these optional modifiers pretty early on with a significant jump in difficulty around the 4th biome, but there's no actual need for you to do it, it's all completely optional. These modifiers have to be balanced though.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
If you give yourself extra damage, you have to give yourself some sort of other disadvantage. You can turn this limiter off if you just want to have a stress-free time and enjoy the story, but given the joy of this game is from breaking it with things like glass cannon builds, I personally didn't see the point in that. Now we've covered the main gameplay of Saros, let's look at the enemies and bosses you need to face in this nightmare world. The enemies have a mix of what looks like Hindu culture with the works of H.P. Lovecraft. There's a lot of arms and tentacles present, perfectly blending the horrifying with the divine in a way that really makes you both impressed and terrified. Even down to the smallest enemy though, everything can be a threat, especially in a world where health pickups can be hard to come across. Whether it be a small robot or a giant spell-casting god-looking thing, they need to be paid the same attention, at least at the start before you get truly powerful. The real star of the show though, like in Returnal, are the fantastic roster of bosses here in Saros. Whilst I think only about half of them are actually difficult, and of course this massively depends on what buffs you got throughout your run and what weapons and modifiers you used, but I do think from a purely moveset basis, these bosses are extremely fairly balanced. Each of them have a significant number of phases too, with most having multiple health bars with new moves every single time you take one out, sometimes completely changing the arena or throwing out screen-filling attacks to take you down. They always come after a good 20 to 30 minutes of gameplay too. All of your XP is riding on you taking this thing down, and it perfectly sets up the tension for the confrontation ahead. Honestly, I could do a boss rush mode of this roster. Some of them that I'll not spoil are just on a scale that'd blow you away the first time you see them. It's so impressive on a technical scale that these screen fillers firing out hundreds of projectiles at once even runs on the PS5, but it's fantastic to see a developer finally get the most out of this machine. So let's get down to it. How long does this game take? I reached the optional true ending of Act 3 in Saros in 14 hours, with 14 deaths, most of which were to the last boss. If you're just wanting to hit some form of credits and get lucky with the RNG, you can likely get this game finished in around 10 hours, but this is massively dependent on skill and your luck with the drops. Full completion will take significantly more time due to some of the trophies, and should take you around 20 hours to complete, depending on how efficient you are with your runs. Most of the trophies here are fairly easily obtainable, with the one taking the most time being a nod to Expedition 33, in that you need to do 33 runs with modifiers turned on. Aside from this, the large majority are just weapon challenges, so nothing is heavily RNG dependent, as in Returnal collecting the audio logs and glyphs thankfully. There is one for completing a whole biome without getting hit once though, and this is by far the toughest challenge you'll face in the game. Modifiers aside. If we're talking value for money, Saros is asking you for $70 or £70 for the base game, and I totally get that to some. This sort of price tag means there has to be a lot of game here. You could argue that there's near infinite replayability with the different builds you can make and the modifiers available, but I have to say that around 20 hours would be my personal maximum for this game, and I intend to have the Platinum Trophy by the time this video releases. So have this in mind if you're going to pay full price. It was worth it to me, but may not be to you. When it comes to respecting your time, this is where the game can be a bit of a double-edged sword. First and foremost, there's a ton of features in here that make Saros respect your time far more than Returnal ever did. When you're out of combat, you can quit out and be exactly where you started when you turn it back on. The load times are incredibly short. You can start from any biome you like out of the hub area, and the permanent upgrades and mods means there's no infinite struggle against a boss. You can basically make the game your own. That being said, you're still looking at 20 to 30 minutes minimum for a run, so if you don't have that kind of time to spare, you'll not really feel like you're accomplishing anything per session. My recommendation is to play a biome or two at a time depending on how much time you have, but make sure you have at least half an hour to spare to make sure you're actually making some real progress. If you're a fan of the roguelite genre or have an interest in a dark personal story wrapped in a third-person shooter, I can thoroughly recommend Saros. If you are not a fan of the genre, I'm afraid there's very little the game can do to convince you otherwise. The story is a really deep character study on a larger scale than Returnal that's well acted and hits on so many levels. The art design of the world of Carcosa is dark, brutal and beautiful all at the same time, and the bosses here are some of the most immaculately designed I've seen in modern gaming. The gameplay is incredibly fast and fun, and whilst it starts out as an oppressive uphill battle, eventually you'll feel more and more empowered to take the biomes and the bosses to task.
None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you.
That's it! You're locked in here with me!
There's no more satisfying a game feel quite like playing this well-crafted and perfectly paced gameplay loop. Housemarque has absolutely nailed what the power fantasy of a roguelite is, and if they had a less open to interpretation story, I think I'd be able to rate this even higher, as I don't think it quite hits those high notes when it comes to the narrative. That being said, if you get frustrated with long stints between checkpoints, don't like RNG buffs and weapons, and struggle with handling bullet hell scenarios, this just isn't the game for you. And Saros is unapologetically all of those things, despite its genre shift from Returnal's more unforgiving systems. If you're on the fence though, or love this genre, go out and get this game right now. It's well worth the time and the money for such a solid first party title. Do you have time for Saros? On this channel I like to give my thoughts on the game alongside an in-depth look at the time you have to invest, because time is precious, right? If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, feel free to like and share. If you want to see more reviews, deep dives and topical videos, subscribe to the channel, and drop any suggestions for future videos down in the comments. And finally, if you want to come chat with me, you can find me over on x.com/gracious_rhino. I'm Gracious Rhino, look after each other, and I'll catch you soon.